To prepare for the s'more stuffed cookie recipe, you'll need to cut the marshmallows in half. You'll need to break up those Hershey bars. You'll need to break up the graham crackers. And you'll also need to set out the butter so it gets nice and room temperature. All right, we are going to continue making our s'mores stuffed chocolate chip cookies. One of the first things that we do is we combine the butter, sugar, and the brown sugar. So I have my softened butter right here. So it calls for 1 cup of room temperature butter. 2 sticks of butter is 1 cup. So I'm going to dump that into my mixing bowl. The next is 1/4 cup granulated sugar. I already have that measured out, so that goes in there. All right. Next is 1 whole cup of light brown sugar. Remember how we measure that out? We really pack that in there, so we're going to dump that in there. And so now I'm going to go ahead and mix it all together. So you're going to pause regularly to kind of get the butter and the sugar off the sides of the bowl, and then you just keep going with your mixing. It says to mix for about 2 minutes. I'm just going to let that go for about 2 minutes. So now at this point it says to add 2 eggs. So one is going to be just a normal egg, and the other one, they just want the yolk. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're going to crack 1 egg into there. And then the other one, we just need the yolk. So I have the egg right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crack it, and I'm going to open it up, and then I'm just going to kind of let the white fall out. It's kind of easier said than done. So you just kind of let the white part of the egg fall out. What I do is I kind of transfer it back and forth a little bit, letting as much of the white fall out as possible. And now we're left with just the little yolk. So we're going to dump that in there. Very good. Okay. So next we need 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Remember, we want to make sure that we are getting the teaspoon one. So it's not a tablespoon, it's a teaspoon. So 1, 2. All right. 1 teaspoon of salt. All right, we're gonna go ahead and mix all that together, making sure we're not forgetting anything on our recipe. Now it calls for 1 teaspoon of baking soda. One thing I wanted to show you guys is kind of a tricky way to do baking soda. If you get a clump of baking soda in a cookie, it tastes really bad. So I've come up with kind of an easy way to make sure you don't get any clumps of baking soda in your cookies. Again, please don't ever mix up baking powder with baking soda, okay? So this recipe calls for baking soda. It calls for a tablespoon, or excuse me, not a tablespoon, a teaspoon. Again, we don't ever want to get those mixed up, right? So again, we're gonna measure this out just like we measure out dry ingredients, right? So we fill that heaping, and then we use a straight edge knife to just smooth that off so you get exactly a teaspoon, okay? And one thing that I do when I get my teaspoon, so I've already measured out my flour. So there's 2.5 cups of flour in here already. I put my baking soda into this little sifter thing, and I sift it out. See, now that I've sifted it out, there's little balls of baking soda right there. Those little balls can get kind of hung up in your cookies, and then if you get a big bite of that, it's gross. So I just smash that in there, and then I take my little sifter and I sift out my flour a little bit. And what that does is it makes sure that baking soda is just nice and mixed up in that flour. That way you're gonna get fluffy cookies, but you're not gonna get big salty bites of baking soda. Okay, and anytime you're making cookies like this that call for like 2.5 cups of flour, you want to do this gradually. You don't want to just dump all the flour in at once. It makes it kind of difficult. So what I do is I turn on my blender just really low, and then I gradually start putting it in. So I put a little bit in, and I'm going to let it blend a little bit. put in a little bit more and let it blend a little bit. I'm going to let it blend a little bit longer. Maybe turn it up just a little bit. Alright, then I'm going to put the remaining bit of flour in there. Alright, all of the... So now it's getting really clumpy in there, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it off, and I'm going to use my spatula to go ahead and scrape the dough off the sides of the bowl and kind of out of the beater a little bit. So I'm going to scrape the dough off the sides of the bowl there a little bit. And then I'm going to let it mix a little bit longer. Alright, this recipe you can also do by hand. You don't have to have a fancy mixer like this. Mine's honestly not that fancy. The ones at the school are pretty fancy, but this one's not. You can make these cookies by hand really easily, so you just stir it all together with a whisk or a wooden spoon. Alright, that to me looks pretty good. Go ahead and look at this again so it's nice and smooth. Alright, and I'll kind of show you what this looks like at this point. So that's what the dough looks like right now. So now it calls for 2 cups of semi-sweet chocolate chips. Make sure you get semi-sweet or dark chocolate. There was one time I messed up and got milk chocolate, I think. I don't know. It wasn't near as good. So semi-sweet or dark chocolate is the best. I just go ahead and just dump the whole bag in there because it says on the bag there is about 2 cups in there. So I'm going to go for it. You're going to go ahead and just fold it in there. So just kind of stir it up in there. Use some muscles. You know how to do this. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and put together our cookies. What I'm going to do, so the directions say that you need a 2 tablespoon cookie scoop. At home, I don't have a 2 tablespoon cookie scoop, and what I have is a spoon, so I'm going to work with it. So I'm just going to get a ball of dough out. I'm going to go ahead and make it into a ball. And after I make it into a nice little ball like that, I'm going to squish it. So squish it. I'm going to kind of make it long a little bit. So it's like more long. It's not super round. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my graham cracker down, my piece of chocolate, and then my marshmallow. I did make sure to wash my hands thoroughly prior to putting these together. I always want to make sure we're not spreading germs. And then I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to roll it into a little ball. There you go. I'm going to squish it out like this. Alright, and then I'm going to put that right over top. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to just enclose all that dough together. So you make a little bubble of a cookie there. Alright, and then you go through and you do that with all of your cookies. Have fun! Alright, so I have my dough balls ready to go. They are heading into the oven. My oven was preheated at 375 degrees. These are going to go in for 9 minutes, but I'm definitely going to watch them. I think I'm going to set my timer for 7 minutes, and then I'm just going to stare at them. I just don't want them to overcook. I like my cookies to be nice and soft. So my cookies turned out pretty flat and pancakey. They definitely tasted amazing, but I think next time I do this recipe, I'm going to put the dough in the fridge for a little bit so they're a little fluffier.